All right, welcome back to another episode of Culinary Connections Distribution Dialogues, where we dive into the heart of food service. And it's been interesting. This is, I think, my 16th episode, and maybe I've been top heavy on seafood distribution, but it's something that I've come to love. When I started my career in distribution, it was really rooted in specialty food, and then went over to a produce company that acquired a meat company and a seafood company, and so I had to learn seafood. It was not something that I really got my bearings, and then went to work for a large seafood company. And it's been interesting talking and hearing about people's journey in seafood. And seafood is one of the it is the last frontier when it comes to procuring wild product, right? Like other than foraged mushrooms and some truffles and other little knickknacks, most of what we buy in the world is farmed, right? Beef, pork, chicken, vegetables, and today I've got Joyelle Fleites out of Miami with Q Plus Foods. I had the pleasure of getting a chance to meet her when I was in Miami a few weeks ago, and I got introduced. I was at a hotel, and I asked the chef. I said, "Who's the best seafood purveyor in town?" And he came back with a business card, and it was Q Plus. And as I'm opening up my eyes to the world of distribution, there's 16,000 food service distributors in North America. It's really hard to know who every player is. And um, we had a chance to sit down, and she had a very interesting start to her seafood career. So why don't you give us a little bit of background on how you got into the seafood business?
So I actually got into the seafood business initially when I first got out of school, and I got basically an offer to move to UK to start a seafood company. And back then, I have never even bought a piece of fish my life, and I could not even say that I enjoy eating fish neither. But it was more of a, while you're young and you don't really have any attachment or anything per se. So you're like, okay, if somebody gonna offer me a job opportunity to go start a business at others' expense, why not? It would only, make sense for me to jump on that. So I did. So I ended up actually doing because I mean we specialize in just tuna and swordfish, so those are the only two species that I started, learning, and then we ended up had a pretty good and successful run in UK, and then that's what brought me to Miami. That after that.
Now, when we met, you talked about spending time on fishing boats. Talk a little bit about your experience in the actual, going out and sourcing and getting fish.
So the company I was with back then, they're one of the largest longliner back then. They had over, I think, 140 longline boats worldwide, and they have had always kind of planned where they would have their base really carefully because tuna like migrate. So as a result, back then when I was like involved with them, they had their base in Senegal and Ghana, in Indonesia, in Panama and Suriname, and then and in Trinidad as well. So back then I was then I went on a pretty almost intensive training kind of per se. So I was traveling with the ownership, and then basically would just go to different bases, and then from there that they had me to talk to the captain, and I was involved with offloading the boat. So you're talking about back then it was like from somebody never seen a piece of fish. Not I cannot say I never seen a piece of fish, but meaning that I was a total novice to offloading 800 to 1,000 pieces of tuna per day, 4 or 5 days a week in this basis. And then you kind of, in a way, you actually you got into it. I think there's a lot of hardship,
Whew.
truthfully, with all the fishermen, because they're sometimes out, especially with the longline boats. Sometimes they're out for minimum 2 3 weeks, sometimes for
And how
months.
many people are on the boat?
Depending on that the size of crew, it could be anywhere from 12 to even as extensive as 20. And then later on, when I visited some fishermen in the Galapagos, it could be as little as two.
Wow. And for those that aren't aware, what is long line? Define long line for someone that maybe in the produce business or just in another aspect of distribution that doesn't deal with seafood.
So the long line boat, meaning because there's several different ways of catching tuna, and the most sustainable one typically is being referred to as that long line fishing. So what it does is like every day when the boat goes out, they typically already set out a location where they anticipate there might be a school of tuna that might swim by. So what they do is they would set out a long line of maybe 300 set of the bait per set. And the
Hmm.
bait could be sardines, could be herrings, could be squid. And then they basically just set it out and then they wait. So if the school of the fish, like the school of tuna came through and they chose to eat the bait, then they would get hooked.
Hmm.
So in so many ways, it's kind of more like it's not that they aggressively go out there to just capture the whole fish, I mean, compared to the percenter boats. So the percenter boats that they would typically, that's a much bigger operation. They will even have helicopter involved. They will have um, super high tech boat that would actually show them where the school of the fish is. And then they would then first, send the helicopter to go to the location to identify where the fish is, right? And then from there, then they send the rest of the fleet there, and as a together, they set out this huge net, look like a purse, and that's why they call it percent boat. And then basically from there, then they capture the whole thing. And typically, this practice is seen the most with the canned tuna, the industry. And so oftentimes I found it, um, it just once you are in the industry, and then when you see people kind of talk about this whole dolphin friendly and sea turtle friendly and all that, and fundamentally, if you know how the actual uh, fishing method is, you will know it's, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's in so many degree, it's almost like they're telling people that what they want to hear.
Yeah, I think people that I don't care if you're in distribution or you're just a consumer, you don't realize the reality of how we access food, then what has to happen when you drive price down. You have, I mean, there are sacrifices made in the process because of consumers wanting a cheaper product, and a byproduct of that can be process, right? And we see often day boat, insert whatever it is, and I think that that's not entirely accurate, right? There's very few, it's very unlikely when you think about the complete logistics that have to happen. If you're in Reno, Nevada, and it says dayboat scallop or dayboat tuna, to really think about the process of how that was caught, then packed, then shipped, then received, then transported, and then into a kitchen. The reality is it's very difficult to do. And on the flip side, this type of fishing at scale I mean, you're in Florida, so there's a ton of watermelon fields. There's a lot of, produce that's grown in Florida. Imagine every day changing where you have to farm. Like, ooh, I'm going to go travel to Mississippi today to go, you know, farm my crop of tomatoes that I think live in this general area. Or as a cattle rancher, maybe you see it a little bit in bison where it's a little bit more quote wild, but um, fishing is definitely one that's how it has to operate. And I think there's maybe some misnomers. And I don't know what your stance is on farm seafood versus wild, but I think that to feed the world and to have consistency and quality and anticipate, to have economies of scale, aquaculture is something that's needed. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so certainly. I think typically the minute like people hear that I'm in seafood, the number one question I always encountered was, "Oh, how fresh is, let's say, tuna, right?" And that's actually like a tricky question because then my question back is, please give me the definition of fresh. So definition of fresh is uh, your fish stands the stocking day fresh, or the actual how long this fish has actually been caught, right? And in terms of tuna, in any given day, typically for any consumer to enjoy that piece of tuna in front of them versus how long ago that tuna actually been caught, I would say the freshest possible, probably 7 to 10 days, give and take. Because tuna, you actually don't get to catch tuna just the offshore. And typical time, like typically the boat have to go out at least 200 miles out, the offshore. So it's usually a 3 days out trip, right? And you have to have the boat go out like 3 days. And you're talking about like a longline boat. Longline boat, that again, they could set out maybe three set of the 200 bait per day, right? They could be say, hey, like, let me set it out and wait 7 8 hours. And if I don't have much, let me put out, like let me move around and try to put out another set. The boat could be wait around there for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. Each set you might have 5 fish, 10 fish. If it's a very good set, you might have 15, 20 fish, right? But that 15, 20 fish is not gonna fill out their tank. So therefore, the captain is not gonna make the decision just, hey, that just come back with only 20 fish that in the tank. So as a result, they will stay out there as long as they have enough of the fuel and enough of the food. So you're how fresh this fish is, you're really at the mercy of how good the catch is for this particular trip. So the freshest you can, possibly get, again, 3 days out. Let's say if they waited for 3 to 5 days, if they were lucky, and then they came back to take another 3 days. Then from there, then they offload to whatever the handling facility. Then from there, then they maybe have to make it down to uh, truck to the airport, and then get into the port of that entry, maybe Miami, maybe New York, however way. And then from there, being sorted and being graded that again, then get to us. So in all honesty, in the most ideal world, it's probably 2 weeks turnaround. And the most average and a normal scenario, you're talking about, I would say even 3 to 4 weeks, sometimes even longer. And
Yeah, it's a
and this is kind of where the interesting part of fresh. Now, compared to farm raised species, a lot of people have this almost misperception. They think wild is always better than farm. And I think after being in a business for so long, you then, you learn, or once you really dig into, you learn that there's actually a lot in terms of like a farm raised species, the overall condition is a lot more control. Like you would know exactly that say when this fish is actually being harvested and when that fish actually um, got killed and then got processed and how long it actually takes from the farm to my hand and then to the consumer hand. And then on top of that, you also got to um, evaluate from their farming practice, their feed, what they feed the fish in so many ways. I feel like if you are able to pick a good like a fish farm with a good practice, that's actually a lot better. To me, it's like a lot better fish than wild. You know, in so many ways. If that
Yeah,
answer your
I mean,
questions.
I think as a consumer, you have to also think about wild fish are going to eat what's in the wild, and that could be plastic, it could be a tire, it could be whatever is out there. You don't know what they're swimming in, and in aquaculture, these companies are spending a lot of money to know water temperature, pH level, acidity levels, deter predators, right? So when you look at mortality rates, right, it's actually you have a truly better eating experience. You can control the pricing. I mean, you talked about having boats go out for X amount of time, and now you have a more controlled environment and product that can be harvested to order, right? Leave the fish in the water until you get the PO, and then the process begins to get that product. But in your journey in seafood, you've got a lot of experience you know, being on those boats and talking to those captains and also being female, did you ever feel like, uh, was it challenging? Like, did you have to like show them that, you knew what you were talking about? Did they give you immediate respect? Did it take time to build? How did that play into such a male dominated industry?
Surely, I probably feel a lot more of that. So years back, I had the opportunity that somebody invited me to Galapagos to basically to show the local fishermen there how to grade their tuna. And I remember that I went from, you know, just imagine this that Asian um, girl that got sent to Ecuador. First of all, I've never been to Ecuador, and then you had to travel, and then you go from mainland Ecuador, then travel to Galapagos. You got to Galapagos, and then you ended up you're sitting in a room with all this at least a good I think 12 to 15 fishermen, and of course everybody kind of look at you kind of doubting you that, oh really, like this is the person gonna show us how she grades the tuna, or how she would identify what quality of the tuna is considered number one at 2 plus, and so forth. But then as the meeting carried on, they were surprised when I kind of told them that I I was able to actually look at the piece of the tuna tail at the port of the entry when I cut the tuna tail, like from the boxes, and I could tell when this fish that was caught, whether the fish was handled right, the fish was stressed or not stressed, um, and they were kind of surprised. You could tell on their face they were like almost kind of like, oh, like with a little bit of the disbelief. So when I started breaking down kind of the detail, like how I know um, from the bloodline, how big that the bloodline is, that I could identify how long like this fish that has been caught. I could tell from the texture of the fish how, whether when they got the fish, whether they actually hit the fish hard or they actually put the fish to death instantly, because sometimes either they somehow use the wrong like method, then you would see the texture of the tail would have that burn texture. And then they're, wow, okay, she might know like a thing or two, right? And then from there, then when you actually go to the facility where they offload the fish, and of course you have that the fisherman knows that which boat, or I mean which lot of the fish that is theirs. And when you started having a conversation that with them, that's kind of when they uh, appreciate and they respect that, oh, you actually have the idea or understand what they do and what they go through on a regular basis. And in exchange that they learn to accept you as uh, one of their people per se.
Now that you've started, your distribution company, has that carried over as well? Like your experience adding credibility to who you are, and again, I had a podcast earlier in the year with two lovely women, very experienced in seafood, and they just talked about the challenges in getting to where they've been because of being female. Second, if you go to Boston and go to Cena, right, it's just the kind of joke is like it's all a bunch of blue blazers, right? Like that's the feel when you walk in, and has that remained the same as you now are in the distribution side um, in your career?
I think surely, I think most people that kind of like back to that what you said that earlier. This is such a male dominant industry, and in so many people. I mean, even with my own family, initially when they heard about me getting into the seafood business, they they doubt that I would be capable of even pulling that off. And they were my family. They were kind of like, oh, you have never even
Mm.
bought a piece of fish in your life, and seafood business is kind of rough. Do you have what it takes? But how I actually look at it, it's kind of more like it's not okay. Well, in terms of if you just kind of talk about physical strength, yes, perhaps, being a female, we don't have the advantage, let's say, to lift the heavy boxes. But in reality, that lifting heavy boxes, it's only um, like a very small portion of kind of what we do, day to day. And I would say that over the years, what I have found that kind of separate myself from the rest is female actually pay more attention to details. Um, we don't really look at, because it's not about, oh, who can pick up, or I mean who can actually rear in heavier, bigger fish. But instead we kind of look at that details, kind of what I like explaining to you, that I pay attention to. All right, so with the grading tuna, the color, the bloodline, the texture. You pay attention to the little detail, and oftentimes those little detail is kind of like what would set you that apart from the rest, like what would surprise people. And also being, female, we also don't you don't act on the emotions that as much. You kind of try to be as logical as possible. And I think having all these kind of characters surely have helped me in the business and kind of set us like apart uh, compared to the rest. And I think you're gonna see more and more. Like I feel like, other than that physical part, that we don't have as much of that strength compared to men. But I feel like in terms of that mental strength and the ability to pay attention to the details and to actually act more with logic, I think those are actually would actually become that more and more important factors in terms of like what was said. Let's say this person not apart from the rest, or the job like performance, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I think, yeah, totally. And I think modern companies today are going to empower anyone to be their best version of themselves, and hire accordingly and promote accordingly if you do a good job, and you do research, and you show up early, you stay later, you put the effort in, right? It's hard, like, you know years ago the phone was connected to the wall. Like, you didn't have a cell phone, and you could just
Mm-hmm.
leave the office, and that's what it was, right? You didn't have email. Like, people mailed you letters, and now we're connected all the time, and it is what it is. You can like it, you can not like it. We have to understand what those work life boundaries are independently. But for you to thrive in your career, you got to put the work in. You got to show up, do the extra credit, and doesn't matter who you are, right? If you do those things, you'll excel in your career. Let's take a step back and think about when you started Q Plus. What were the first 6 months like for you?
It was rough, like
Yeah.
rough. um I would say, in fact, when I first kind of started Q Plus, I that the reason why the name of the company is actually Q Plus Food rather than Q Plus Seafood was initially I wasn't sure if this is what I wanted to do, like to pursue seafood, if this is what I set my mind to. So when I first started the company, I actually just thought that I don't because I left the company that I was with prior, and obviously they were in the tuna and fishing, and of course people were commenting on, oh, how could I just like left them, blah 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 blah. And so I really was trying to think, okay, so how could I utilize the experience or what I know without actually stepping on anybody's toes. And then as I was doing that, then I was still in contact with back then some of the people that I have worked with in the past, in the trade, maybe with that with the restaurants, or with some other like distributors. And then I started getting inquiry for, oh, um, do you carry, salmon? Or can you actually find me like nice tuna? Can you find da 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 da? And that's how we evolve toward to like where we are, today.
How has it evolved since you started? Where, and I see it in my own business, where I thought it was going to be when I started is a bit different than where it is today.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel the same way? Like, has your idea in your mind of what it was going to be, has it pivoted? And do you think, Q plus in, what does it look like 2030?
Shortly, the company has evolved, big time. Because back then, I was actually when I, once I kind of started getting into more of a seafood distribution, I had no idea like where the company like gonna go per se. You sort of just put your head down, do the work, you do the best you possibly could, and you just carry on. I was actually making a lot of the deliveries myself in my own car at the back of my trunk. And I remember it was, the one day, for some of the people that kind of know me, that one day that I must have packed over 2,000 pounds of the seafood in my little black Toyota RAV4. And I got another call. Somebody called me for another one piece of the salmon, whole fish. And so I was trying to grab that piece of the fish to you say, hey, I really need to fit this salmon into my car. And back then, I have this company that was actually helping me with a lot of that is product. So like my friend, Chris Twist, he kind of looked at me and he goes, Joyelle, there's no way you could even fit a fly, an additional fly into that car. And I kind of look at him and say, Chris, no, I have to do it because I don't have the time. I would not have the time to be able to come back here to grab that piece of salmon. So I'm gonna have to find a way. So sure enough, I fit that extra piece of the salmon into my car and carry on and make my delivery. So of course, when back then when you're operating like that, you had no idea where the company gonna go. And 12 years later, now we have like 11 trucks. We do have full staff. I mean, we do have a full crew, and we surely have come a long way, right? And I feel a little bit like it's not like when you first started, you already had that the idea and thinking that, oh, how far are you gonna go? Really, back then, you were driven by, I just want to do a good job. I just want to do a good job for the people that they gave me the opportunity or that believe in me. I want to make sure I gave them the best possible fish and the most, with the most, the honest, practice. And even to this day, I still believe in that. And that's kind of what drives that company. Could I see what Q plus be 2030 from this point? Honestly, I kind of, if you want me to tell you in terms of like this, how big that a company could potentially be, I have no idea. I could only tell you that I will continue to drive myself and to drive the crew to, basically carry on with that very same same drive. Simply that I want to find the best possible fish for the customer that entrusts in us. And then the rest, the rest that will come.
I have a very relatable story about making a delivery early on. I mean, if you're in food distribution, you're in sales, you've made a delivery in your car, period, the
Mm-hmm.
end. Not only have you made one, you've made a lot of them. But I was living in Nashville, and the chef from the Memphis Marriott, which was attached to the convention center, called me, and he was in a panic because he had a quote pop up that was for like 1,200 people, and he bought, it was like 80 cases of pre-made dessert. And Memphis to Nashville is about a 3 hour drive. And so I put the order in. I, at the time, the company I was working for didn't pay me for gas. So I just started dating who's my wife now, but she had like a little Ford Focus. And so I used her car because it could cost like $30 round trip in the little Ford Focus. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't have tinted windows, and just like you, I had to fit literally everything in. It was chocolate cake, and I was so nervous that it was gonna melt, or thaw out. But it was, put freezer blanket over it, cranked up the AC, and rode on down. And chef was very appreciative and grateful. But all of those things that you do as a salesperson to go the extra mile to earn your opportunity. And I'm sure, gosh, there's so many other stories about, making deliveries and making things happen right after hours, are part of distribution. Now that you're 12 years in, looking back, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of points in the journey where you wanted to throw your hands up, like, screw this isn't worth it, I don't want to do it. you know was it just internal that you wanted to keep pushing, or was there someone that pushed you, like, no, we got this, we're going to figure this out?
I think I think fundamentally it's like I think there's so many aspects, to this. I think uh internally, I'm somebody that I do not want to fail. It's just as simple as that. Hey, it's either I do the best I possibly can or that I don't do. And if I decided to do something, then I own it, right? Then I really have to just make sure I do the best I possibly can so that I don't fail. And you're right, there were numerous times that I was, because back then I was like literally that a one man. Don't forget, I was doing the buying, I was making the delivery, making the sales, and when I got home, I still need to store all the invoices, putting all the stuff like into the system. And there were times like at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, you'd be like, "Why am I doing this?" You know, and like not to mention that later on when you have scenario that say, oh, the issues with fish cutters or the issues with the drivers, with employees, with the customers, there are days you just want to pull your hair out. But then you kind of then come back to, I have come like a long way. I have all these people um, looking up to me, like basically that the employees. There's that social like responsibility too. If they're all counting on me, even like today, I have like one of my like the employee. I still remember that the first day that when he came, he did not speak a word of that English. He started off as a warehouse like worker. He cleans the warehouse, right? To now he's one of my most like reliable, almost like a daytime production manager. He's always there. He even learned how to cut fish. He packed fish. He can do it all. And he went from, when he first came, he came to work on the bus. Then he came on the bicycle. Then he came on the scooter. And then to now he's driving like a really nice car and he's happy, right? So when you see how
Amazing.
these people grew with you, and they are looking to you, that they're counting on me to basically to better, like, I mean, like, to be better, so I need to be better so all of them could be better. And so there's a lot of that also, or I mean, pushing me too. It cannot be just, it's no longer just me, that one person. If the one person that is good, then that that it's good. There's this now social like responsibility. I also have obviously like customers that have done business that with us for years and years. They entrusted us. Not that they don't have any other companies they could source their seafood for, but they chose us, right? And I think with all this, I mean, like, there are times like it's pretty daunting, because if you think about it, it's like it's quite a lot. Like, it's quite a lot that you have to always need to make sure you not only find the best possible fish, you also need to make sure the whole team you carry out could perform. Finding the fish is the easiest part. Finding a good source is only 25% of the job done, right? To get that fish back to the warehouse, it's another 25%. To make sure your fish cutters process the fish to the specs to what the customer wants. That's just another 25%. Then from our warehouse to the delivery to the customer table, that's another 25%. So, but every single part counts, and with all these people are counting on us, and the employees are counting on, they're all like looking to me, say, hey, what is, we all need to find a solution for to be better, like next month, to be better that next year than we are, today. And I think those are the things that drive me ultimately. It's all
Great
this.
answer. Great answer. Um, Jumping to sales and innovation, how do you feel connecting with a customer is changing, right? You've been in the game now in distribution for 12 years. You've seen some kind of a change in that time period. How we connect with people, how we share the message, how we communicate pricing? How do you guys go to market? How do you sell Q plus?
I feel like that oftentimes, you walk into the place, and I'm sure that anybody in sales in the food service, um, oftentimes nobody would want to write off the back, uh, to how do I put this a little bit more? It's like, okay, chefs typically would give the impression that they know it all. But at the end of the day, we all only know what we know, unless somebody else shed a different light of what you perhaps didn't know. You are gonna assume that what you know, this is what's driving your decision, right? Now, oftentimes when we go to visit like customers, yeah, you will come across the people. Some are more open-minded, that willing to listen. Some are pretty much like they are pretty set in their way, and they believe they know it all. So almost you have to work it in a way to prove that perhaps you know a thing or two that they didn't know. And then from there, then you could probably open up, you know, basically make a little crack, and then make them to be more open up to you. And therefore then you can then share that with them what you know perhaps that they did not. And then that, of course, then business, I mean, goes like a long way. But things definitely that have changed, because I also feel like there's also another more challenging factor is where we are in South Florida. I think South Florida, I remember when we first installed like the seafood like software, I mean like years back, and I have this guy that came, and he kind of make a comment. He kind of say to me, he goes, the seafood the industry is rather shady, and there's a lot more games being played, especially in Florida, compared to the rest of the country. And he was not wrong, but he simply kind of said that just based on him implementing the software with various different company in a different industry across the country, and he made that observation. And in reality, what we encounter on the street on the regular basis, it's just like the chefs would have no reason to not to believe what's delivered to their door is anything other than what it says on the invoice. I will give you one example. Um, we could kind of come across this quite a lot. Salmon. Salmon is one of those species that, unless you really know the fish really well, unless you get the fish whole, and even if you get a fish whole, you not many people could probably say, "Hey, I can take a look at that piece of the salmon. I could tell the country of that origin," right? So oftentimes the chef would order Scottish salmon, and they have no reason that the Scottish salmon that they order and came, and got delivered to their door, it's anything but Scottish salmon. But in reality, uh, because people try to be in the more competitive pricing, they try to get their food in the door, and because people are betting on you're not gonna be able to tell what that salmon, like where that salmon that really come from that piece of the fillet. Therefore, they a lot of that mislabeling happen that in our business. And how do you then tell that customer, hey, politely, your Scottish salmon, you might be getting a Scottish salmon from Chile, because at the end of the day, there's no single company would be out there doing business losing money. Doesn't matter how much you believe they like you. They only like you if they get to make money. from you, right? And but sometimes
Yeah, I
that's a
mean,
little
I think
bit difficult part. Go ahead.
yeah,
What were you
to
saying?
to to articulate the maybe smoke and mirrors that are happening in the business, right? And you have to think about when you source a particular product and you have 1,000 pounds of Chilean commodity, and then you have 400 pounds of Scottish, maybe premium product, right? And someone buys you out. You have a country club that has a plate up for, 1,500, and they're using it 2 days in a row. Now all of a sudden you're out of the product. You're long on one of them. Are you packing it out as something else? To your point, how many people are actually going to see it, right? And this is a very old school business, right? Like that's the way it's been done, right? And the reality of people looking at it, we talked about it earlier. What is your definition of fresh? Is it just like looks good, smells good, gills are good, eyes are good, check, 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 price looks right? Now, how does the new FISMA Act that's going to roll out play in with country of origin and possession and lot number? Like, I don't know. And then who's going to police that? Is that like just the sales rep on the street calling, the local health department? I mean, like, how does that actually happen? But I would definitely say it is so different than selling beef. When you buy a box, it's USDA prime on the outside, the pack date, kill date, all those things are right there. But when you get a box of fish, it could come in a white tub or a bag or OTR bag, depending on whoever is cutting and packing that. You generally have no idea where, you're just taking the word of whoever. And when you think about value proposition as a seafood distributor, is what's your cutoff time, what's your product diversity, how often are you coming to me, are you easy to do business with, do you credit me when I need credit, do you give me a hard time, do I like the sales rep, um, do you show up on time, is the quality good, do I trust you? Those are the things that um, can lead you to be different. And noticing in South Florida, and I was just in LA this week and was talking to someone, and they said, "Yeah, we sell products to 100 distributors in SoCal." I'm like, 100 distributors, and I live in Denver, and I've got to think about like my own distribution circle, and really thinking, well, there's not 100 people, 100 distributors anywhere near us, right? Like I'm very limited on. I've got a handful of broadliners, a few seafood companies, a couple of meat cutters, a couple of specialty companies, and then going to South Florida is like, holy crap, there's all sorts of competition and
Mm-hmm.
different games being played because you're trying to get the business. But one of the things I've often said is if I win you on price, I'm going to lose you on price. If that's the only thing that you're coming to me for is the lowest price, it's not going to be a mutually beneficial relationship. You're going to use and abuse me, right? And often I would, I called it the pain in the ass tax, where I would just, up the price, and I didn't want to play that game because I knew that I'd get dropped just like that, and it just really wasn't worth it. The drill. Like you're going to get a phone call or a text on Saturday because something happened. Like how am I going to respond if it's a transaction? I can't invest into that. But if you've got my back and I've got your back, and someone says, "Hey, man, just so you know, so and so is coming in here with lower pricing," like it's really hard. I've got food costs to hit, my boss is on me, is there anything you can do? Is this legit, is it not legit? And that's building that partnership through trust and backing one another up, I think, is what will help you win. As we wrap up, you know any anything else to add about you and your business as you have come along, or inspiring words for someone that's starting and trying to figure out their life in distribution?
I think it's kind of more like you really have to stick to what you believe, Like I feel like I oftentimes share with the team. I say, look, there are three elements in doing the business. You got quality, service, and the price. And this is like a love triangle. You could only pick two, but you cannot have all three. You cannot expect somebody to have the best possible quality and the best possible service. Kind of, like what you said, to the enter your car on a Saturday and then to put the stuff that in your cart and then jump and go and then making all the impossibles happen. But then at the same time, gives you the cheapest, possible, prices. Again, something there has to give, right? Then it comes down to, like, I feel like in since pandemic time, a lot of the dynamic of our business changed. And you have the bigger, like, corporation or some like restaurant chain. They kind of started, like, the easiest way for any upper management to manage a company is through numbers, right? Because let's say if you have the people that have their headquarters in California, the only way for them to, like, monitor their business in Florida or in Denver is just through very simple, like, numbers. And therefore that food cost, it's almost become that only thing or the quickest thing for them to evaluate how well that they are doing. And then that then give a lot of companies that almost that loophole, like, okay, so if I just drive the prices down, then I'm going to earn the business, because that's the only thing they are, like, looking at. And since there's nobody really looking at the integrity of the fish, the actual practice, and what kind of service that they are really, getting, because again, these people at the headquarters are not the one that receiving the favors that you and I have done to these people. So there are days for sure would be a lot more difficult than the other. And I think for anybody that wants to start a business, that the concept of being your boss is nice, right? But in all reality, having the freedom or the liberty of do as you wish comes with a lot of the responsibilities. And you have to first kind of ask yourself, how, do I have what it takes to take all that responsibility? Even when I, expressed to you, like, earlier, that you ended up taking that responsibility of your employees, like, livelihood, right? If your fish cutter, he's the only source of income and he had a family of five, that family of five is counting on me and the company to perform, right? There's that responsibility, right? And then if you have, imagine that you have that times five or times 20 or times 40 or times 100, you have to be able to take all that, maybe stress, responsibility, and all, and still perform. Then, yeah, then being your own boss is is great, right? And that's kind of like, I think people need to, like, ask themselves that. But then again, you also have to look at it, like, I mean, the other part, the people, for any the entrepreneur, you want them to also have that ability to be that inspire, that they wanted to do something, they believe that they could make that difference for whatever the business they chose to get into. You also don't want to kill that, but then you have to have both of what you think sounds good and feels good, and the reality part. And you need to be able to find that balance between the both in order to figure out, hey, whether this is actually the right path for you, that or not. It's not as simple as just say, hey, yeah, it sounded good to have your own business, but there's so many the elements to make that happen, or to sustain that, right?
Yeah, you can be a very successful employee and have a great life and know that you can somewhat walk away when you're the entrepreneur, the business owner. Like, there is really no walking away, right? You
You
are
couldn't
the
quit, right? If
you
you're the
you
boss,
you,
you cannot just quit.
you can't. And there's you have to get used to doing things you don't want to do at times that you don't want to do it. And because other people are like, oh, I'm going to take PTO and I'm just going to go away and do the thing. And
You can't
here
even
you're
turn your
left.
phone off.
No, you're always connected. And I'm learning that, slowly, thinking about you 12 years ago, where you are now. I'm in that same, like, kind of, I'm in the infancy. I'm in diapers, like my business is one in diapers, but it's been a fun, you know, really started in January was when I really planted the flag, and it's evolved, and it's going to continue to evolve. And I'm having to adjust to things that I wasn't used to doing. But I saw this meme on Instagram where it's like, being a small business owner is, someone that was riding a unicycle and juggling fire, and it was like, that's accounting, and then there's marketing, and then there's sales, and there's all the things that you have to do. And um, you know but I wouldn't trade it for anything. And your comments and conversation have been awesome. And Joyelle, I really appreciate you jumping on and sharing your journey with us. And where can people
And thank you.
find out more about Q Plus if they wanted to find out?
They can actually go to our website, and I mean, truthfully, I feel like we're a little bit surely a little bit lacking on the social, like I mean the media part, but I think it's a little bit more of kind of like the word of the mouth, because I'm somebody kind of like that believe a little bit more about that. It's more important what you actually put out there for people to receive, because sometimes people could put out like, oh, really nice thing on the social media and stuff like that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's truly what people that will be getting. So I'm a little bit old school in that sense. And but I think that it, people could feel free to connect that with us however way, and any questions or anything that we could be of any help. I mean, we're always here.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Ian.